That's it.
Zara.
Didn't need to bring it, man. Cake. You can still have the piece. Oh, that'll do it. That'll do it.
It's true.
Title alone is quite concerning.
Right, some housekeeping first of all. How are you all doing? Any advances on? Meh. It's Halloween today. Yeah. Now, I hope you've all got your getting out and going out of the way, because I don't want to see anyone tonight in Uplands. It's my time, not yours. Secondly, we are now mandated to evidence that we have been through this nonsense with you before when you have submitted it. So, thank you for the 60% of people who completed this. It sounds impressive, and it's only 9 people. I was looking at these parts because I think the rest of the scores are just meaningless, basically. I will keep on. I'll make more question boards basically to address this. I do think it's a useful thing. I've been messing around with things this year, and yeah, it hasn't happened. But I will commit to making more, including today, and more questions before the lecture to answer. Starting from this afternoon, when I put out the weekly announcement / email, I'll pose some questions to structure. Obviously, we don't have a lecture next week because it is study week. And what are you supposed to do in study week?
Study.
Oh yeah, it's very self-explanatory. Well, I'm not here, okay, so there are things going on. I think Richard sent an email to all students this morning with a list of things that are going on. And the idea is that you can have one-to-ones with academic mentors or module conveners during that week as well. Sadly, I'm not here, so you can't have a one-to-one with me, I'm afraid, because I'll be about 1,000 miles away to the east. In which case, office hours are today. Office hours are 1 till 2 today. Office hours are 11 till 12. But also Friday, I'm going to open up Friday day basically for any queries about this module. So from 10 till 2 on Friday, I'll be prompt in my office. So if you need anything about this module and you have time on Friday, please come along on Friday. Do you all know where my office is? Does anyone not? There's the map thing with people's faces. Yeah, my face is in 4 bits because Mostyn fucking hates me is the only conclusion I can draw from that. But thank you all for doing these comments. I do find them worthwhile. I actually got 60 first years to fill it in. Would you believe that? 60 of them. What a bunch of twats. Right? One of them, the one negative comment said the teacher is overwhelming. And talks about inappropriate things that make me uncomfortable. Oh. Now, I could go two ways on this.
Yeah.
I can moderate it a bit, or I can double down on that shit. And I'm not sure which way I'm going to go yet. It's going to wait till Thursday, and it's like, if I come in and start talking about like felching orangutans, then it's going to be a whole thing. And I'm into it, quite frankly. So if you sign in, we will do this. Before we start this today, I just want to do a quick run around, because I said in the module handbook that week 6, which is next week, should be used to work on your assignment, which is due first week of December?
1st of December.
Yeah.
Literally
Yeah,
the first, right? So 4 weeks from now. Okay, so let's have a progress report as to where we're at. Start at the back, Morgan.
Just doing some readings for now.
Okay, you know what
Yeah, I know.
text you're doing.
Of course, yeah.
You've done this kind of thing sort of before.
I've got some text from the digital media, like the essay that I did last year. So
Okay.
especially on virtual worlds.
Okay, so yeah, that's mine. Reese nicked that off me. Which is fine. I liked it, but yeah. Okay, good. Cheska.
Yeah, I've just been doing some reading on virtual worlds and like immersion and like
Also today might be helpful.
yeah, and like
Okay.
obviously like how music and mood and that affects the immersive experience and bits and bobs like that.
Okay, I write about that in my virtual reality book. But I got a bit of it in the end of today. Just as a heads up, the module unlocks after today. So any stuff that comes after today's lecture is all available. I've done it for the first few weeks just so you follow the bits that I think are important for assignment 1. But after this, nothing is locked down. So if you complete this week's tasks, the rest of the module becomes yours to use. Dawson.
Yeah, so I'm doing reading around there. I'm just thinking about
Okay.
8.
I'm a non-starter, I'm afraid, at this point.
Okay, so let's help Jess out. What are you thinking that you might look at?
So that's where I'm stuck a little bit, is what game to do. Whether to do something I haven't played before, something I've played already. Like go back in.
Any advice?
Yeah, any tips?
Well, what game console do you have?
PlayStation, PS4.
Right.
I'm usually like third person kind of thing. I'm playing Uncharted at the minute, Uncharted 4. So that's kind of
That'd be
my-
fine.
I could just do that.
As a
Yeah.
as a game
Yeah.
to use, I think Uncharted 4 is a fairly good one actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it draws in. There's certainly stuff about today you could talk about in terms of embodiment and the sort of status of the world that you're in. I think there's elements. Uncharted supports online play, doesn't it?
Think so?
I believe so.
I don't do
But you don't do it.
No.
Okay, so there's that element to it. Certainly, like lecture 2, I want to say, on theories of play. Any game like Uncharted, any third-person shooter asks fundamental questions about that nature of the magic circle, because you are being positioned in your subject position in the game is always very strange in a game like that, where you've got that over-the-shoulder position to it, where your subject is here and this is what you're playing as, but you're withdrawn in a particular way, and it positions you in a subject sense in a very strange place. So there's stuff to talk about there. I think it'll be fine.
Yeah.
If that's what you're playing at the moment,
Yeah.
rather than jump onto something else.
Yeah, I just play that. And
Yeah.
I did. I also did that module with Reese last year. And I did quite focus on like colonialism in games and stuff. So there's quite a lot there.
I
that
think
read about,
Uncharted
lean on
talks
with
to
that.
that,
Would be
yeah.
perfect. Yeah.
Again, my stuff. Did I not do the video for that?
Yeah,
Did
you
Reese
did.
do it? Oh,
Yeah,
I
you
did, did I? Okay. Nick,
Just reading.
just reading. Sims you're doing though, right?
Pretty much the same thing. Just got an idea of what I'm doing.
Are you still going to stick to where you were at?
Yeah, I think so.
Perfect. Jack,
Pretty much the same, just reading and
Okay. Mason.
Just playing Oregon Trail, seeing what different ways I can kill my family and stuff. And just, yeah.
It's a wholesome game. You know, what kind of diseases are they getting? You know, cholera yet?
Like killing of starvation and dehydration.
Okay. Yeah, you go in the old school, I like it.
I'm just reading around as well. I'm not sure what I'm doing yet.
Have you decided on a particular game?
Not yet, because I currently only have my laptop and it doesn't run a lot of games. So
Okay, this might be an issue.
So I'll see what I can do.
Okay, might be a good idea to follow Mason's lead and pick one of the old school things
Yeah, I was
that you
thinking
know
like,
can run on a laptop.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe like Oblivion or Skyrim or something
That'll work, definitely. Ben, how you doing?
Some vague planning and how we laid out and some initial recordings.
I feel the word vague is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Fundamental.
Jordan?
Just reading, making some key points and
Okay.
kind of brainstorming what sort of key points we want to hit.
Good. Eve?
I've started writing sort of like a script
Okay.
of what, like just currently just getting stuff from the lectures of what I want to look at, and then obviously I've looked at, like I've done some more specific reading on Red Dead because there's a lot of stuff.
There is some stuff out there. Can you remind me afterwards?
Yeah.
Esther Wright at Cardiff wrote a book on Red Dead Redemption and American history, which I have a copy of.
Oh, lovely.
So I think I might have put it on the folder.
Okay, yeah.
Do have a look there first. If it's not there, drop me an email and I will ping it over to you.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
It's a new one, it's 2022. So,
okay.
because I know the weird way that I label files is like the year first. I think it's well, I'm certain it's 2022. It came out in like August.
Nice.
So.
I need to try to play the game.
Yeah, how's that going for you?
Great.
Have you got past like the first thing?
No.
There we go. I'm really looking forward to this video. I know it's going to be like several attempts to beat something that took me 35 seconds, I think, to do. So yeah, it's going to be. I'm really looking forward to it. Right, are we all in the Neopod?
Yeah.
Okay. So the this is a really long title. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of getting a way to like make this smaller. What I want to look at today is what I think, having spent the last couple of years working my way through game studies literature, you see this singular idea come up time and time and time again. It's the concept of flow by, and I'm going to have a go, Mihaly. She sends me highly. I think that's how you say it. She sends me highly, something like that. Did anyone have an improvement on that? Did anyone actually know how to say his name? Okay, so we're just going to go with she sends me highly. Okay, so Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi is a psychologist who in the early 80s proposed a theory of what's called optimal performance. The idea that when challenge and satisfaction meet each other perfectly, you enter a psychological state of optimal performance, which he calls flow. We're in the flow of things. To reverse the psychological bit, we probably are all familiar, if not necessarily with games, we're all familiar with circumstances where we feel in the flow, if you like, where what we are doing locks out everything else in the environment around us. How many people drive? It's not usually that many. There's quite a lot here. Have you guys done a lot of motorway driving? Okay. You know that feeling you get when you've driven for like 10 miles and you can't remember a thing on the motorway, and you catch yourself and think, I've just gone loads, and that's flow. It's that sweet spot where driving on the motorway is pretty easy anyway, because everything's going in the same direction. It's not like you have oncoming traffic or parked cars or pedestrians or anything like that. It's a fairly easy driving situation. For some reason, people get really scared about driving on motorways, and it's like, no, piece of piss. So you've got a task which is fairly straightforward, and you might have like something on the radio or something on Spotify playing or something like that. You're in a quite sweet spot with life, and all of a sudden, half an hour's gone, and you're like, shit, I'm in Cardiff. What happened there? Like, you know, that is what She Sent Me Highly is talking about with regards to flow. It's that experience where task and satisfaction meet at a sweet spot, and all of a sudden we become, and I'm going to use the term here, immersed in the experience to such an extent that the rest of what is going on around it becomes unimportant. And I get this in lots of different ways. It's not just, for me, I think I'm really susceptible to flow. It's like cutting my toenails. That becomes a flow experience for me because I'm crippled as well. Like, it takes me a while to warm up, to get my leg to bend in the way that I can do it, and then I'm in there and it's like, oh yeah, this is pretty sweet, like, you know. Oh, you know, cleaning the shower, because that's really a semi-annual kind of event for me, so I really get into it. Now, on the flip side of flow, what I want to do today is investigate some different ways of looking at the same phenomena. Because flow has become this dominant paradigm in game studies, it's not really been critically investigated until the last few years, and there is a new body of literature, myself included, who are coming along and starting to kick the shit out of flow a little bit. Because people, you know, it's not just me, there's people who've published on this already. I'm currently putting a book together on this where I'm going to position flow at like the bottom level of what we can do with games. What we're noticing is that flow doesn't explain everything. It explains something, and something quite important, but there are other things which are happening also, which build on top of this position. But so it's important, I think, in two ways. When you're doing Let's Plays, what's interesting to me is I don't think flow occurs because you're deliberately stopping it from happening. It's like when you're talking about the experience that you're in, you're disengaging yourself from the experience. So you deliberately take yourself out of flow in order to critically reflect on it. I don't think flow as an experiential state allows you to be critically reflective. You've got to be in it. You've got to be subsumed by it. You know, you've got to be in that spot. It's like when I'm driving down the motorway, I'm not thinking about driving down the motorway. I'm not thinking about, you know, am I doing this right? Was it the right thing for me, you know, to make those obscene hand gestures to that old woman who was driving down the middle lane, which I did last night on the way back to Cardiff. Fucking 60 miles an hour in the middle lane. I had to go round her, and it was a whole thing. And yeah, I mean, she knew. She knew about it afterwards. I knew it when I was speeding towards Patalba with my hand out the window like that. So in your Let's Play videos, there's an easy win here. I think if you want to talk about the experience of being immersed in a game, you can even reflect that by doing this process, you are deliberately not immersed in the game at this point in time. So you can almost like recollect about what it feels like to be immersed in it, but at the same time talk away. What I suspect Eve is doing by plotting a voiceover here might be even better, because you're probably going to get game footage and then talk over the top of it. So you're meeting the two together, so there's a really interesting thing you can do there about reflecting on if you get into kind of flow state playing the game, then you can talk about that in terms of the voiceover itself, because you've already done it. But I suspect also Eve doesn't get flow in Red Dead Redemption 2 because she's shit and she can't play it. And that intersection between task and satisfaction only comes when we've got a certain level of mastery over the game itself. When we struggle, when we're finding it difficult, when we're first learning how to play something, it doesn't occur. It's the point at which we get some form of mastery with it, when like the controller doesn't feel like a controller anymore, it feels like an extension of your hands, if you want to use the McLuhan sort of sense of it. That, you know, it kind of doesn't feel like weighty in our hands anymore. It, you know, it completely disappears from our circumspection. These are all things that you're familiar with, right? I'm not talking, it's not just me. You know, this does happen to people. So I want to explore this idea a bit further today, and kind of bring some different contours into it as well, and talk a little bit about some of the research actually towards the end that I've done on this topic, which is in its infancy, I will be honest, it's in its infancy, but I'm trying to get MIT to publish a book about this at the moment, so yeah. I can't work at MIT because I'm not good enough, so I have to work here, which is a shit university. I couldn't work in a good university, but not shit for media, for other subjects. You guys are doing good. But just remember this is going on YouTube. But hopefully MIT will allow me to expunge 60,000 words of nonsense on this. The key to understanding how flow works as a theory, I think, is to position it properly. Flow is about gameplay. It's about that aspect of games itself, the playing of games. What it feels like to be in the game itself. So how it feels. So we're in now to touchy-feely stuff about games. I think the lecture I've done for week 7 is the emotional content of games. So mostly Catherine Ibista on that as well, who's really, really good. In this sense, ideas about representation aren't important because it's the rules of the game and dynamics of the game and the interplay between, in particular, the rules and the game geography become important. The build of the world is incredibly important in this. It doesn't necessitate complexity in order to have a flow experience. Something as simple as Tetris, for example, has got a really, really simple game mechanic which people can get deeply immersed into. Everyone's played Tetris, I assume. Everyone in the known and unknown universes. There are undiscovered tribes in the Amazon who have played Tetris. I'm certain of that. Tetris can't be more simple, right? Incredibly involving, though. After a little while, you are just concentrating on those blocks. You are really into it until the game mechanic kicks in super fast, and then you can't do it. One of my favourite all-time put-downs from the 90s is that person is so stupid they rotate the cube in Tetris. That still works today perfectly. I got blocked by Nadine Dorries, the former Culture Secretary and Conservative MP, for tweeting her that she's so thick that she rotates the cube in Tetris, and she actually blocked me. Which I thought was harsh, because I've been posting memes of her drinking for ages beforehand, and she did not say anything. Aspects of time, place, cultural context, and just to draw on my point, I was talking about your just subject position come into this as well. So these intersections between the game dynamics, the rules, the game world, and cultural context in particular, how we assimilate the cultural context of the game into our own lives, these intersect in terms of how gameplay affects us. For that end, we could become incredibly immersed in a game. I could be very, very immersed in Red Dead Redemption 2, for example, and have been, to be fair. When I was playing it first time round, I found it a really deeply immersive experience. Second time I played it through, not so much. I was quite disengaged from it at that point. I think because I played it once already and I had a little bit of muscle memory of what was going on. I'd seen a lot of the events in it. But also, contextually, it was like 4 years on. My interests perhaps had changed, my life had changed a bit. I was now no longer in my 30s, I'm in my 40s. I don't know if that was a big thing. There was perhaps 1,000 different things that could have contributed to the fact that I didn't find it as an immersive experience the second time round as the first time round. The point I'm making is like something that's immersive to Ben and Morgan and Cheska, Dawson. What you find that pulls you in might not pull me in. And something I find really immersive, like, I don't know, Sonic 2, you guys could look at and think, this is for kids, this is shit, this is not entertaining, this is not immersive at all. What we bring to the game is incredibly important. This is a point I'll expand upon towards the end of this. It's one of the things that actual flow theory doesn't take into account. What we bring in to the game is actually really, really important. So, what has been positioned as the key way of thinking about this is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Csikszentmihalyi's theory of flow. Very important to note the title of the book that this came from, Flow, the Psychology of Optimal Experience. Key words, psychology and optimal, as far as I'm concerned. This is a psychological theory. Therefore, psychology theories always bring a certain set of expectations and a certain set of rules with them themselves. How do psychologists find stuff out? Can anyone tell me?
Lots of observation, usually through tests and people do weird stuff and look for patterns.
Making people do weird stuff has got a name. You know, it has a number of different names when we make people do weird stuff, but in a psychology context, it has a very specific name. Anyone studied psychology at any level?
Yeah, a long time ago.
A long time ago?
Yeah.
I got a degree in it. For my sins. What a fucking waste of time that was. It's called experiment. We psychologists do experiments. Psychologists have human subjects, which they call participants, because you're not allowed to say human subjects, because that's creepy apparently. So they have participants, and they give them something to do in a particular condition, and you will have usually one set of participants over here, the experimental group, and another set, the control group. And you'll have two sets of results from these people, and then you will compare them against one another. So you have a variable between the two groups, and call that usually the independent variable. And the result that you get out of it is called the dependent variable. And this is what psychologists measure, what the results of the dependent variable. So, like virtually all psychologists, especially in the field of cognitive psychology, Csikszentmihalyi was looking specifically in an experimental setting at this concept of flow. Trying to assess what are the factors that get people into this deep state of immersed behaviour in a particular experience. Looked at a lot of different experiences, and indeed his own idea about this came from gameplay and not from digital games. And you can think, well, he's doing this in 1980, there weren't many digital games around at that point in time anyway, but playing with his dog. And the idea that, getting into a rhythm of playing, throwing the ball for the dog and the dog coming back becomes this kind of flow experience where, you stop thinking about the game and you come to a maximum state of enjoyment with it, which he calls optimal state. If you balance, the key thing, if you balance skills and challenge perfectly, then you enter into a flow state. If your skills and the challenge posed ahead of you intersect with one another at a particular point, this will be a state of flow. That tells us a few different things. It means, for a very straightforward game, very easy game, like playing fetch with a dog, because we're not talking nuclear science here, throwing a ball and a dog goes to get it. You don't need a great deal of skill in order for that to be enjoyable. That's the point he's making. As games become more complex, perhaps like chess, in order for that flow state to emerge in a game of chess, you need to have a high level of skill to match the challenge of the game itself. So skills are proportional to the challenge of the game itself. So a really, really difficult video game requires a very high level of skill in that game in order for it to be to have an optimal experience of it. If you want to test this out, try playing Space Invaders. Very, very famous game, 1977. There's a great book on Space Invaders by Martin Amis, the novelist, whose father, Kingsley Amis, was a famous professor at Swansea University in the 60s. He wrote a book about, this is how much of a nerd Martin Amis is, right? He's like early 80s, living in Soho in London. Okay, and he used to go out at nights, and you think, right, why would you go out in Soho in the night in London in the early 80s? Well, you're banging prostitutes or you're banging dudes. It's one or the other, right? Not him. He was going to illicit Space Invaders arcades. You had to do like weird knocking on the door to get into and stuff like that. All night Space Invaders cafes and things like that. And he talks really lucidly about how high levels of practice get you into this state where you're not even thinking about anything on it. In order to do that, you go through weird things, like you clean the machine, like you make sure the buttons aren't greasy or the joystick isn't greasy in order to have perfect conditions for play, that the lighting is good, so you recreate the sort of perfect state of affairs to do this in. And then he would play and play for hours in this flow state. But it took him a long, long time to get that good. That was the point of it. People who, like early 80s arcade games, when there's like a moral panic about video games, like, kids are putting loads of money into these games. Actually, if you were good, you weren't putting loads of money in. You were putting like one coin in, but you were playing for like 3 hours because you could get into this state of optimal experience of it. So, flow, this state, is most easily reached through play. That's Csikszentmihalyi's main conclusion in the book, that actually play is the way that we actually get into the zone. That's really what he's talking about. So, experience of attention. Sorry about this, it's so small. I know you've got it on the screen. Please go back over this later. Flow is the experience of intense absorption that one feels when you play in a game in a particular way. Flow-producing activities always have clear goals and feedback, so you're told you're doing well. There's a reward mechanism always going on for it, which again suggests that, video games is a good mechanism for this, because you have scores, you have XP, you have rewards, you have progress. As you go through something, the environment itself changes to indicate that you're getting better at something. When skills are balanced with challenges, players enter what's called a flow channel, and then immersion is not just limited to this, but challenge-based immersion is really something that games achieve really, really well. Something that game designers actually aim to do. That's a very important point. As flow theories become very important in game studies, it's also become really important in game design. And one of the things that game designers are actively trying to do is design a flow experience for gamers. Why? Why would they do this? Why would you make something that puts someone in this state?
It keeps you playing and you enjoy it. It's quite enjoyable being in flow.
There's 2 points there, and they're both absolutely correct, and it's exactly how I'd answer. One, it keeps you playing, so there's an economic imperative. You literally don't want to buy a game that you don't want to play. Interestingly, some people try to buck this, and I'm thinking in particular of Hideo Kojima. The last game he brought out was called, does people know about even Death Stranding? Has anyone given it a go? What was your impression, Morgan?
It's just really long, so I find it weird how I have a
I reckon there's 20 hours in the middle where you just walk around delivering stuff.
I have one pet peeve though. Guillermo del Toro's in it, but he's not actually voiced by Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
Which is another thing, which is typical of Hideo Kojima. Yeah, he was like, I'm going to put this really famous guy in it, but I'm not going to use his voice because that would just be ridiculous. I think Death Stranding is an exercise in not having flow. I think that's what because he's throughout his career he's tried to do these things that change the way video games are played. So even his early stuff like Snatcher had really interesting things to say about the form of video games themselves and breaking the fourth wall of video games. And then Metal Gear Solid, all those games have something really profound about video games to say. Death Stranding, I think, is just going like that to video games. It's like, I'm not going to let you flow. I am not going to let you enjoy this experience at all. You are going to play for 60 hours, mostly walking around really slowly, delivering stuff that you have no idea the purpose for. And that's the game. It's like, why am I doing this? To make you think about the structure of other video games that you play and how this kind of zombie state that you're put in flow actually stops you from reflecting on what you're doing. It's a really dodgy experiment to do for a game that cost like 120 million to develop. Brave, kind of stupid, kind of love it at the same time. According to Jay McGonigal, video games make it possible to experience flow almost immediately. The power of flow theory and intersection with video games, and I think McGonigal is absolutely right. The classic mechanic of video games is get people in the flow channel as quickly as possible. So you start the game, even though Eve is a great example of how this doesn't always work, you start the game really simple to match up with a low skill level. Develop the skill through a few different missions as you go on, keeping you in that flow. So your challenge raises with skill exponentially until you are actually doing things which are really challenging, but you have developed the skills through this thing. So the most AAA video games now have this model, right? Where you start with like mission 1, which is really, really straightforward. And then as the missions progress, all of a sudden you're doing big missions, but you're not getting killed. You're not dying straight away. You know how to crouch behind things. You know how to do stealth. You know how to do headshots. You know how to do this, that, and the other. So the flow experience is maintained by building skill through it. As Jay McGonigal, I think absolutely, and she's a really astute theorist who also, helpfully for our purposes, designs games herself as well. So she is a game designer as well as an academic. And her idea here is that games have perfected how to manipulate flow right from the beginning that you start the game up. Even the cutscenes, these long, boring-ass cutscenes at the beginning are designed to put you in a flow state right from the beginning, where you have no skill in the game at all, but you feel there's something going on and you have agency in that thing that's going on. Again, that's actually a Hideo Kojima thing. He was the first one to do that with Metal Gear 1. So, Csikszentmihalyi developed his concept of flow in the 60s and 70s. According to him, based on the research he did in the 60s and 70s, flow is a native category experienced by many subjects. I don't like this phrase, native category, but there's a lot of different ways of saying it, and none of them are any good. I guess what he's actually saying here is it's an innate quality. We all have the capacity to experience flow. It's something everyone does. I don't think that's true, by the way. I think I think today people would be incredibly naive to assume that. I think there's a number of developmental disorders which can really stop people from having flow, for example. Something like ADHD, for example, is really problematic in terms of flow. And ADHD it's not massively widespread, but it's a spectral disorder. We all have ADHD. It's just some people suffer from it very, very badly, and some people don't suffer from it much at all. Me, kind of in the middle. I got kind of ADHD things, but I can sit and read a book for 6 hours if I need to. I'm kind of all over. I'm just weird. My brain chemistry has been affected by stuff. In his original work, he talks about chess players, artists, dancers, surgeons, basketball players, sports players in general, experience of getting into the zone and being swept away in their chosen activity, blocking out everything else around you in order to focus upon the thing that you are doing. It would be wonderful if we had a theory of flow for studying. It would be great, wouldn't it? It's not going to happen, I'm afraid. It's too boring. You wanted to understand why people ignore hunger, danger, thirst. Saturday, it's like, I've done all my things, I clean, I put the hoover around and clean the bathroom and done all this crap that people have to do. Sat down and thought, right, bit of Far Cry now. Yeah. About 2.5 hours in, I was like, my stomach really hurts. It's because I needed to go to the toilet. like really badly. My leg was shaking, all right, and I was like, I'm in the middle. Should I just use the glass? No. I will go upstairs and I will press pause, and it takes me right out of the flow experience. And I was like, when I came back down, I just wasn't into it. So I put Soccer Saturday on instead. It's, you know, you will ignore. I frequently do that. It's like bodily motions have to stop because I'm in something. So he wanted to understand this process, how we get into it. So how does the gameplay affect us in such a way that we literally stop homeostasis and keep on doing something because we enjoy it so much? That complete immersion is how we link it up with play. I think if you look at Huizinga's Magic Circle, the idea that Huizinga has in the Magic Circle is that we are in a state which the rest of the world is unimportant. We have bracketed ourselves off from the world. So in that way, flow links to this. Unsurprisingly, since I've criticised Huizinga's Magic Circle in the past, there is a similar kind of aim into criticising flow as a sort of theory here as well. But that sense of deep absorption definitely happens. I don't think there's any question about that. But I want to know from you guys how it's happened for you. Give me an example of something that has really flowed. I've got so many examples. But I suspect I've been playing games, well, I know I've been playing games for a lot longer than you guys, unfortunately. Super Tennis on the Super Nintendo. Damn. Game I've not played, which I've bought and still haven't got around to. I kind of didn't like the first one, weirdly. It was really good, but I think
the second one was better than the first one. Yeah.
a lot of people say the same, so I've got high hopes for it when I do actually
Yeah,
get
some
around to
people
it.
hate it, so.
I can't believe they've remastered the first one.
Oh yeah.
Literally like
I
10
mean,
years after it
60
came out. It's such a money grab. I'm going to buy it, of course. You know. I'm going to wait for it to come down to like 15 quid on the PlayStation Store, but yeah. What a side one.
One for the station preparation.
Very nice. How'd that go for you? Oh, you haven't had your marks back yet, have you? I know what Cheska got for hers.
Oh, why would you say that?
Because I marked it! I don't know if you know, but I'm your dissertation supervisor.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, I marked mine last one. I've only got 2 dissertation students this year. Piece of piss. It's like, she's alright, she can crack on her own, so she doesn't need any supervision. You haven't done it, have you?
No, I was meant to meet Non today. I just realised I haven't emailed her back.
Wow. None will be upset. She'll be cussing you out in Welsh in the
I'm sure
office
she
as
will.
well. 12 hours plus. That's brutal. Actually, yeah. Give me some indication. Do another thing. Give me an indication. What's your longest period actually playing the same game in one sitting? I suspect you've got me beat because I can't do much more than 6 hours. Shove it up on the screen, Morgan. We want to see it.
I'm gonna say.
I suspect your levels of focus. This could be spectacular.
There you go.
That's not bad.
I thought it'd be more. That's
On VR.
With breaks.
That's really
obviously,
impressive.
but
Did you not take any? How long would you play Moss for?
A few hours.
Straight.
Makes
I
your
mean,
head go
I've
funny.
been doing VR for a long time. An hour is the most I can do on anything.
Yeah, it makes me
I,
feel
it's not,
like
it's not, I don't get the motion sickness anymore. My head feels hot.
Yeah.
That's the
I was
actual
just
problem.
wearing the thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
I'm
You feel
sweaty and I get the eyes start bulging out of your head, like, you know. I get that whole thing. 11 hours. I think you'd become zombified if you did that, which is cool. 10 hours, fall asleep. And then wake up in like 4 hours and start playing.
Yeah.
15 hours, Dan.
Yeah. All day.
Epic.
Yeah.
Epic. This is interesting. So we got. I'm going to ask you about Simpsons Hit and Run. I suspect. Has anyone else actually played Simpsons Hit and Run? Okay, it's a fantastic game. PlayStation 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the right generation. It's not a PlayStation game, is it? And it's not PlayStation 3. So my first question is, how the hell did you manage to play it? Because you weren't even born when it came out.
So my mate used to have a PlayStation 2. God, probably like I was probably in primary school at the time.
Okay.
And it was probably like the closest I'd ever come to playing like an actually like violent, somewhat.
It's
I don't know,
got an
free-roaming
age
kind
to
of-
it,
yeah,
Simpsons Hit and Run, to be fair. It definitely, considering it's quite cute in some aspects, and it's Simpsons intellectual property, so they're not going to let you go on a rampage. But you can go on a rampage.
Yeah,
If you're so inclined, you can start mowing people down big time.
But yeah, I used to go on like sleepovers and stuff.
And
then
not sleep.
Yeah, just not sleep. Just stay up all night, just playing Simpsons Hit and Run. But I'd probably say it's like the closest thing I've actually played to. It was like a precursor to GTA for me. It felt like similar in a way,
Interesting.
but
Interesting. I think it was. If you look at the development cycle, I think The Simpsons Hit and Run came out slightly before GTA 3, but it's within months. And I think the developers knew what Rockstar were planning and got ahead of them, and it is kind of a Simpsons. I think it's very. The game mechanics of it are quite similar, put it like that, to GTA 3 anyway. It's interesting to me because it's a driving game, and I find driving games really conducive to flow. I don't play many of them. I don't play like Forza or anything like that, or Gran Torino. Or anything. I don't find them interesting. I don't find cars interesting. Basically, I think a car takes you from like point A to point B, and then on the weekend point C. That's all it's for. So it's just a tool, right? So I've never owned like a good car. And like people watch Formula One, and I'm like, sorry, John. I know. Jordan watches Formula One and she's really into it. Formula One is shit. Alright, it's just people driving around in a circle for 2 hours. What the fuck is that all about? Crash! If they crashed a lot, if they were allowed to like bump each other off the road, I'd be watching that shit, you know. And if they had guns as well, while they would do that's now we're talking. I'm watching it, but it's boring as shit. But driving games are really, really intensely flow experiences. In my experience, the ones I've actually put a link this week to a browser version of a game that I think I have you all beat, which I once played for 21 hours straight when I was 12, called Road Rash 2, which is really, really difficult. Well, it's classic in terms of designing the flow experience. It's really easy at the beginning. And Road Rash is a really interesting game. It's because it combines driving motorbikes and beating the shit out of the other people. So you can like get chains and clubs and things like that and whip the other riders with a chain and stuff. And you have to avoid cars coming on and cows and people, because if you hit a cow you go flying and you get hurt, and it's amazing. The flow thing comes from a couple of different things. One, it's quite straightforward to play. Literally, on a Mega Drive version of it, you just press B and you go forwards, and then you take your finger off B to slow down. There are no gears, there's nothing like that, and then you press C to kick or hit people. 2 buttons. Amazing. And you're using the directional pad. This could go on for days, trying to complete the whole thing, go through all the stages, honest to God, it could go on for days. And of course, back in those days, there were no saves on video games. So you had to play from beginning to end. There was a password system, but the password was like 28 characters. Nobody could be asked to even write the password down. So didn't have photo phones back then. It's good. Really, the point of this, I can see why some of these things are. Uncharted 2, 3, and 4. I think, again, these are AAA games. I think it counts for Last of Us 2. Classic case of a AAA game which has been designed to do that. I even think back in the day, you know, Simpsons Hit and Run is a classic example. If you think of the early missions, how straightforward they are.
Yeah.
Gets you used to the controls of the car. If you play it now, and I don't know if you have played it recently,
No,
it's so janky.
I can imagine.
It's really, if you play games now and you go back to like anything on PlayStation 1 or 2, it's like the controls, they feel awful. You feel really unresponsive and like what you're trying to do doesn't work. But you can think the mastery that you got from it was all based on the challenges that were set. I think Moss is a different level of flow altogether because of the VR environment. I'll get into that later. Modern Warfare, I think, again, is a classic AAA way of doing things. Early missions get you into this, but as an experienced player now, you can jump straight into the difficult stuff because you have all those skills. So it's almost like immediately, as soon as you start playing, you need it to be hard. If you went back, if you bought a new Modern Warfare and started it from the beginning, first hour or so would be a bit, you know, this is boring, and then it kicks in afterwards. So I think the principle all fits here. So when we talk about flow channel, this is really what is being said. This graph does it perfectly. Arousal and efficacy, so challenge and skill. Okay. For she sent me highly. Challenge is about a state of arousal. The challenge that you get provides a state of intense arousal within the individual. You are being asked to do something and that provokes arousal within you. Against that, this concept of efficacy is really, you know, how easy or how difficult it is to do something. So efficacy in this context means the ease by which you can do it. If you can keep people in this challenge where arousal and efficacy match up with one another, you get this feeling of enjoyment from the experience, and that becomes a feeling of being immersed in whatever you're doing. You can start applying this concept to lots of different things. You know, a film which provides a level of arousal to the person who's watching it because it's enjoyable in a particular way, but you don't have to perhaps think too much about it. That's immersive. You know, if you're reading a book and it's quite straightforward, you like the content, you know, it's provoking some arousal in you with regards to the content, and you can read, comes together. If you can't read, the book might be amazing, but you're fucked. Because you can't read. What's the point? You know, if you know, if your video game can be very arousing, very nice, but you can't do it, then you don't really get into that flow condition, you know? So playing a piano or a video game might be difficult and unpleasant at points, but in hindsight we will view those as enjoyable if we get to the state where, you know, flow becomes an aspect of what we're doing. So flow as a principle can redesign, according to Shisami Hailey, it can redesign all aspects of life. Flow, actually. Now, there's a considerable argument to be made that universities have been streamlined in the name of flow. I'm not convinced that they do it very well, but definitely since I was a student, the university has been redesigned in a big way, where my first year modules were as difficult as my third year modules. It was just like, this is university, bitch. Get used to it. We don't do that anymore. First year, very gentle, learn some skills. Here's a library tour. You know, so you don't have to work out how to use the library. We're going to show you how to use the library. I'm going to get a library tour. I got given a card, and it's like books in there. Find them. You know. So we break people in. The skill is low. The challenge, you know, kind of match up. In a second year, you've got some more skills now. We're going to up that challenge. In third year, we do it like this to try and make you feel comfortable and immersed in the experience. Like I said, it doesn't work. Universities don't work in that way because there's a whole bunch of other things that go on in universities which you can't control, like the queue for fucking Greggs. I mean, that's going to break anyone's flow, that bitch. There was no one there this morning. And I'm boycotting it, and I was like, oh, I really want a sausage roll. But no, I'm not going back. So are we all clear on this conceptually? I don't think it's difficult to understand. So, in this half-century since studying flow, and it has been a half-century now, it's become not just an idea which describes video games, but in terms of contemporary culture in general, it's been something that has actually really redesigned experiences across the board. Certainly, education has taken it on board. I think the workplace in general has taken this idea of flow on board. Lots of elements of contemporary culture do this. I think even like the design of everyday devices have flow in mind. I can think of no better device which facilitates flow than the iPhone. Right from the instant, very easy to pick up and use. Challenge is very low, enjoyment's very high. You get sucked into it immediately. But you get better with the iPhone as you go forward. You know, you develop new hand gestures, you develop new ways of using it, your skill with it develops over time, but you stay within that flow. There's no doubt that when they were designing the iPhone in the mid-2000s, flow was a major contributor towards the user experience and the interface. Clear as day. Although Apple would never admit to it, I expect. But there's no question in my mind that they had this in thought. Because of this, in terms of game studies, a lot of people have started identifying that flow has a position of paradigmatic power. Paradigmatic power being it defines the entire paradigm of game studies. Everything in game studies is about flow. To an extent, that's true. If you look at all major works in game studies, they take flow as a concept unquestioningly. It's like, games are about flow. Gameplay is all about flow. And that means it's been applied uncritically, it's been an unquestioned reference. I don't think you write something theoretically about gameplay without including She Sent Me Highly in it. You know, if you look at like Google